Let's make a start. Yeah.
Okay, Madhu, yeah, please go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Badram Karanebhi Shunyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabhi Yajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuam Sastanubhi Vyashema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swastinah Indro Vridrashravaha Swastinah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinah Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Brihaspati Dadatu Yo Antah Pravisya Mamavacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akila Shakti Daraswadamna Nyamshta Hasta Charana Shravanatvagadin Prana Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Lasatu Srimad Ananda Tirtendurno Hridambare Yadvachas Chandrika Swanta Santapam Vinikrantati Padavakya Pramanajnan Pranamya Shirasa Gurun Vyakarishe Yata Bhotam Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam Devam Narayanam Natva Sarvadosha Vivarjitam Paripurnam Gurumshchan Gitartam Vakshami Leshataha. So good evening to everyone. So as you know, for 3 months we have done chapter 15, and which we have always said that this is the essence of Vedic philosophy. And last week we completed the 20 verses, and following which Suresh ji, Shushruth ji, and their respective spouses and the rest of the team have been trying to organize the philosophy of chapter 15. How would it be when you look at it from Arjuna's perspective? What what are the things that Arjuna has said across 18 chapters that actually captures those key tenets of Vedantic philosophy? And Suresh ji made a start last week, and because we had such a packed program, it was a resounding success last week, I have to admit. So because we had such a packed program, we could not do full justice to the Vedantic philosophy from Arjuna's perspective, how he is the taught, and at the same time he is a teacher in Bhagavad Gita. So that's a different angle to how we look at Bhagavad Gita. And again, the whole point of this exercise of us meeting every Sunday is get various views, various angles of to how you can approach this great scriptures called the Bhagavad Gita. And it's with that angle, a new angle is where Suresh Kankanwadi ji and Veena Kankanwadi ji, over the last several days, they have been thinking about this angle very seriously. And I would like to really thank them for making these events very interesting. So today is part two of Arjuna, the taught and the teacher. So Shushruth and Suresh, between them, they are going to they are going to coordinate the event, and the way. And I leave it to Shushruth and Suresh to explain how this interactive program is going to work. And this is probably the template that we need to use moving forwards, as and when we have these interactive sessions in the coming months. Okay. So thank you again to Suresh and Sushruth, and I'll hand over the stage to you both to coordinate the rest of the event. And of course, I'll be there in the background. Thank you.
Do you want to move on to the next slide, please, Madhu? Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in again. We had a really nice session last week. Lots of participation from everyone. And Suresh ji, as Madhu ji said, made a really good start. So I will just recap very, very briefly what we learned. So, firstly, he taught us the different values and the names of Arjuna, the person and the character. And we learned that his names, just like the names of Vishnu, are just not names, they are adjectives and they describe various qualities in Arjuna. Then we moved on to how his mental state was at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, and then as he moved along the path of
Sushruth,
getting taught by
yeah,
uh,
Sushruth,
Lord
Sushruth,
Krishna.
somebody is asking to speak you loudly.
Sorry, can you hear
Somebody is
me?
commented that to speak you for you to speak loudly. She just put in the chat window. Yeah.
Sorry, apologies.
Yeah.
As he moved along the path of being taught by Sri Krishna, how his emotional state changed and the state of his mind changed as well. And last week, we looked at how we can learn from Arjuna as the teacher himself. And That really depends on what one wants to learn from Arjuna. And we briefly touched on how we can illustrate the teachings of chapter 15, which is in fact the essence of the whole Vedas, through various verses that Arjuna has actually said in the whole of the Bhagavad Gita, not just chapter 15, where he doesn't say anything at all. So if you just move on to the next slide, please. So the way we are going to do this is in the form of questions and answers, and predominantly the questions will be asked by Suresh ji to our Guru Madhuji, but we really want participation from all of you. So I did send out the list of shlokas that Suresh ji and Veena ji have kindly uh, sort of filtered out for us to review. And I hope you have gone through some of those shlokas to find different meanings so that we can try and get more out of this session. So we will then relate this to the 9 tenets of Vedanta, the 9 gems that we have already looked at. Arjuna's shlokas will appear. There will be some recitations. We will try and avoid repetition in the interest of time. Uh, but what I would really suggest is that you ask your questions related to those shlokas at the time after Madhuji has finished answering Suresh's question, so that we keep it in context. Uh, and that's really what I have to say before I hand over to Suresh and Veena. So thank you very much, Suresh, for taking this on. Please keep your
Thanks, Ishrat.
microphones muted if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ishrat. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, that's fine. Suresh, we can hear you clear and loud.
Thanks, Madhu. Manojavam Marutulya Vegam Jitendriyam Buddhimatam Varishtam Vatatmajam Vanarayuta Mukyam Sri Ramadutam Shirsa Namami. Good evening. We'll get started but just before we get started, this is the same village rustic of last week, still wondering and gazing in amazement. But I hope at least the lighting this time is different from where I'm speaking. That's perhaps the only difference, but otherwise, it is to try and pick up from where we left last week and make further inroads into what might seem like an audacious attempt by a child. But let's see where it takes us. Couple of things we will briefly touch upon before we dwell into the tenets. One aspect was about asking questions that I had brought up last week, and the other is about establishing basis. So we'll touch upon those two aspects briefly and then dive into the 9 tenets. With regards to asking the questions, let's take a look into chapter 2 as it unfolds. In 247, Krishna says, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phale heturvuhu mate sangostva karmani. Apart from the other aspect of not owning the outcome of action, the fundamental message that Krishna seems to be giving here is that let there be no inaction. Action is necessary. You need to be acting, but the only condition is that perhaps you don't have the right, you don't own the outcome of your actions. Just 2 shlokas later, Krishna also says, Durenam hevaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanamanvicha krupana phalahetabaha. Says, you know what? Karma is so inferior to jnana, just take shelter in jnana. The contradiction is so apparent, but and for most perhaps, that would have been the right time to say, Vyamishreneva vakyena buddhim mohesi me tadekam vadanishyatya ena shrey yoham apnuyam. The contradiction is so apparent. Why are you confusing me? Just tell me which one of these two I should take up and move forward. But this is Arjuna that we are talking about. He doesn't. He waits, in fact, till the end of the chapter, asks a question in between about Sthita Prajna, as Krishna explains about sadhana. And at the beginning of the next chapter, that's when he starts asking the question, Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Hold on for a minute. Let's just step back. Let's understand a few basics here. And the beauty of Badarayana here is that of the thousands of names, he chooses Janardana to address Krishna, meaning thereby, you are Janardana, you are the one who, takes care of the Durjanas. So perhaps adding another angle to it, saying that, is it that what you want me to do? It's your job to be taking care of the Durjanas, but perhaps is it that by taking part in this monstrous war that you want to do? Well, okay, even if that is so, you are the destroyer of Durjanas. Is everybody on Kaurava's side of Durjana? Am I supposed to just go and kill everybody who's fighting? I've told you that there are Bhishma and Drona, people that I worship on the other side, and they're not necessarily Durjanas. And further still, the word Janardana also means the person who actually gives us liberation from this cycle of birth and death. You who are responsible for liberating us from this cycle of birth and death, why on earth are you asking me to indulge in this monstrous war that is going to keep me ever embroiled into this perpetual cycle of birth and death? So just the choice of the word Janardana in that opens up so many different aspects to a question, a clarificatory, what might superficially seem to be just a clarificatory question, is how it unfolds. And just the beauty of going word by word and analyzing it unfolds. And the joy of reading Gita increases as one goes deeper. And that's what we see Madhu ji doing it so brilliantly in each one of our sessions. So I just thought we'll use this as an example of framing a question. But then, as Arjuna said, stepping back to the basics, for us to establish basis as we move forward, it is important to ask this question about Anubhand Chatustaya. The situation is that of a war. It's battle ready. Both, Athav Vyavastitan Drishtva, Dharta Rashtran Kapidvaja, everybody, all the sons of Dhritarashtra, Arjuna is battle ready. He has his bow in his hand, Anuruddhyamya Pandavaha. And so he's really getting ready to fight this war. And he's told Krishna, his charioteer, take my chariot to the middle of the two armies. I just want to inspect them. And very cleverly, Badarayana again says, Eva Mukva Hrishikesho Gudakeshena Bharat. He could have chosen any other names to just describe Krishna and Arjuna there in the center of the battlefield. But he says it is Gudakesha and Hrishikesha who are right there in the middle of the battlefield. So the question therefore is, and what unfolds in this conversation between Gudakesha and Hrishikesha is aspects of jnana, janma, mrityu, karma, sannyasa, whatnot, bhakti. So the question, I think, which inevitably haunts is, was this the right situation to impart such a knowledge? These are deep philosophical thoughts. And here is somebody who wants to go and kill the enemy, destroy them, and win the war. And along with that, the other fundamental question before we get into studying any scripture for that matter is to test as to if it satisfies the four conditions of adhikari, vishaya, prayojana, and sambandha. So with these two questions, I would like to invite Madhuji to reflect and share some thought as we move forward. Madhuji, please.
Yeah. So Suresh, as you rightly mentioned, the Anubandha Chatustaya is a test. Any philosophical inquiry, and this is across all schools of Vedanta and Vedic philosophy, the first thing that before you start a work, before you ask a philosophical question, before there is a discourse, there has to be four criteria that needs to be satisfied. That's the test that anything needs to undergo. So what are those things? That's called Anubandha Chatustaya. Chatustaya means, as you know, is four. So what are those four? First one is Adhikari. The second one is Vishaya. The third one is the Prayojana, and the link between these three. So that is one tool that we use. Adhikari is somebody who is a qualified student. Vishaya is the topic for discussion. Now, having that discussion, what use is this going to be is Priyojana, and the link between all these three is the Sambandha. Now, we have discussed this when we initially looked at the Panchadikarini of Brahmasutra, and then we said, what is that Anubandha Chatustaya in Vedantasutra and Brahmasutra? And we said it is like if somebody wants to be a doctor, what does he have to do? He has to get good A-level marks. Okay, he has to get so many A's and so on. So if he gets those, then he is a qualified student. What is the subject for inquiry to be a doctor? He has to do the studies of medicine, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, etc., etc. That is the Vishaya. Okay. Now, what is the Prayojana at the end of you studying all this? You get a medical degree and you become a doctor. What is the sambandha there? You have to apply to the university through the UCAS system. Once you get a seat, then you have to pay school fees, you have to pay accommodation fees, and you have to go to the medical school every day, walk, write exams, and so on. So that links all the other three and it becomes a sambandha. So now in that context, doing that philosophical inquiry of doing medicine becomes relevant. So we have to apply the similar four criterias. When we ask the question, as Suresh ji mentioned, this is a battlefield. People are ready to kill each other. They've got their weapons up and everybody is really focused. And is that the point where you need to have this philosophical discourse? And is Arjuna a qualified student is the first question. So the resounding answer there is absolutely yes. Arjuna fits all qualification as an adhikari in that context, and the argument there is that was actually is the point to ask these questions. Yeah, so that is the situation where Arjuna is right in the middle of the battlefield and there are his relatives on the opposite side, and he's seeing them, he's perceiving them, and it brings home that message, what on earth is he about to do, and his mind is now frozen at that point. That is when he has to ask that question that will give him a solution for all his situation at that point of time. There is no use talking about this in a pub and getting answers for that, because in a pub it is not going to solve your problems. But here in the battlefield, he needs a solution to his problem. So that situation is also very important. Adhikari, as you know, Arjuna is the incarnation of Indra. So he fits very well as an adhikari. Vishaya is all the philosophical discussion because he wants the answer. What is a prayojana? After getting the answer, he is going to start the war and he is going to wage the war to establish dharma, and the whole interaction becomes the sambandha. So in this context, the Anubandha Chatustaya is completely fulfilled. If even one aspect is not fulfilled, it becomes what is called anarambhaniyatva of Shastra. It becomes anarambhaniya, which means this particular philosophy is not worth our investigation. Yeah. Now on the right side, I've given you three. This is again from Brahmasutra as to why is Brahmasutra or Vedanta Sutra a supreme text. There, Acharya gives Vaktru, Shrotru, Prasaktinam, Yad Aptir, Anukulataya, Apta Vakyataya Tena, Shruti Mulataya Tata, Yukti Mulataya Chaiva, Pramanyam Trividam Mahat. For any discussion, three things needs to be there. Vaktru, the person who speaks. Shrotru, the person who hears. And Prasanga, the situation in which that happens. All three should be right. And all three is right, not only for the Vedantasutra, which, as you know, Brahma, Rudra, and others, they go to Vishnu and say, look, Vedas are all being spoiled. Please, can you come and rescue us? Similarly, you have the same Vishnu here, incarnated as Krishna, and you have the Adhikari, who is the eligible student. So the teacher, the student, and the situation, all of these are established here. So the starting of philosophical inquiry becomes very apt. Now, here is a corollary to that. If Arjuna and Krishna are the same beings, we are being told by other schools of philosophy that Arjuna is also a Nirguna Brahman, Krishna is also a Nirguna Brahman, and a Nirguna Brahman is talking to another Nirguna Brahman, and they are talking about something that really does not exist. So when you ask this Anubandha Chatustaya, it becomes problematic. So Anubandha Chatustaya happens only when there is a real student and a real teacher, somebody who's at a higher pedestal, somebody at a lower pedestal. So Suresh, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Madhu. Thank you. Thank you. A request to others, if you would like to join, add further questions to the discussion, please raise your hand. And between Sushrut and me, we'll make sure that we call out. Otherwise, if we don't see a hand raised, I will just carry on with the slides. But it would be really nice if you would like to join and contribute and add or bring in any other perspective as we go through the subsequent slides.
Harish,
So, yes, please.
Yeah, Suresh, this is Harish. I had one clarifying question for
Please,
you and for Madhuji. So when we talk about adhikari, does it have to be a technical qualification, or can it also be, because in a lot of, I guess, satsangs that I've heard, they also talk about listening, right? Having your listening open or being receptive to the information. So is that also a technical qualification, or is that more of a, I don't know, a different type of, a different category of qualification?
Madhu, do you want to take it, please?
Yeah, I'll try and deal with that first. So Harish, I just want to remind you of who an adhikari is. Jayatirtha, again, when he talks in his works, he gives a clear example of who an adhikari actually is for philosophical discussions. Yeah, we are sticking to philosophy and spirituality and so on. So who is the adhikari? So Jayatirtha says, Ihahi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena viraktasya sama dhamadi mataho mumukshoho adhikarinaha. So that is the criteria he has given. Adhikari, who is eligible for philosophical inquiry. So ihahi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena, he who has actually seen or perceived or understood the real state of the world, and he wants to have an answer. He wants answer to his questions, and he is after the truth. He is after the philosophical truth. Okay, so that person who has indriya nigraha, control of indriyas, control of the mind, shama and dhamma and other things, and who has a genuine interest to find answers to his problems, is the adhikari. So Indra or Arjuna in this context perfectly fits that context. He has seen or he knows what the suffering is going to be. We all know, Suresh ji mentioned about Gudakesha, Hrishikesha and all that control of the Indriyas. He is the head among Indriyas. Indra is the head of the Indriyas. So if anybody has got Dhamma, it should be him. Yeah. So he fits all those criteria. So that is the classical definition of adhikari. Now it is up to us individually whether we are genuine. So the key there is, are we genuine with regards to the questions that we ask? If we are genuine about this, then we all become adhikarins. So I would actually submit here the folks that we all join every Sunday to ask the right question to, because we all want to know the answers for the situation that we individually are. So we are all adhikaris, but not all adhikaris are created equal. So there are different types of adhikaris out there, and they are all seeking some answers to their questions. So in that sense, yes, we are all adhikaris. So Suresh, if you want to add something.
No, thanks, Madhu. So we'll move on. In the sense, we have a few things to
Sorry,
cover.
can I ask? I don't
Please,
have a
please.
hand on my thing.
That's okay. Please.
How else do you want to do this? Do I put it in the chat or?
Carry on. Please ask your question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just going to come in here with the context, as in the prasanga in which this is happening. So could it be that one of the things that Krishna or Vedavyasa is saying is that this question is asked at this particular time to illustrate that everybody has a choice to do the right thing? And if it is not this moment, then how do you know that you are doing what you are doing in the right way? And that is why this question has been asked. Could it be one of the explanations?
Sure, Deval. Yeah, that certainly is one way of looking at it. But there was no point in Arjuna and Krishna having this conversation in a palace whilst they're both having something to eat, and Krishna is playing the flute, and they're having a good time in the evening. It was never going to be an environment to have those serious discussions. I know some of us do in our parties, but the real question and the real solution should come in a real situation, which is what has happened here. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right from where you are looking at it. But this was the opportunity given to Arjuna. Let's That'll come later during this session as to what was Arjuna's position. Did he ask the question? Did he ask himself? Whatever. So those situations will come. But this was a situation that was created for him so that he would ask the right question and wage a war, so that we benefit from it.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Mother. And Mohan actually points out in the chat as well that it's not that we are in a battle in the Kurukshetra mode every instance. Many a times just unpreparedness and the enormity of the tasks makes us develop cold feet, very much so. So we move on. Thanks, Mohan. So the Shrotru, the student, I think, as we just opened up the discussion on Arjuna, it will be good to just try and understand Arjuna slightly better. And there are these different interpretations of the character of Arjuna. And one could actually, pick up different shlokas and interpret them differently. And we'll try to just bring two sides to how Arjuna's shlokas could be looked at. It could be interpreted as, I really don't want to know a lot. Just I have this specific doubt. Krishna, can you just clarify for this for me, and I will move on. Neetaji, if you could please help with the 5.1 and 6.39, please.
संन्यासं कर्मणां कृष्ण पुनर्योगं च शंससि यच्छ्रेय एतयोरेकं तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम् एतन्मे संशयं कृष्ण छेतुमर्हस्य शेषतः त्वदन्यसंशयस्यास्य चेत्तानह्युपपद्यते.
Thanks, Neeta. Again, the choice by Badarayana here. He says he's asking Krishna, just just destroy the ignorance in me and lead me from ajnana to jnana. Just give me a simple, straightforward answer, and I'll be done with it and move on. But there are shlokas, and Veena ji will help us with 4.4 and 10, 18, please.
अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद्विजानीयां त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति विस्तरेणात्मनो योगं विभूतिं च जनार्दन भूयः कथय तृप्तिर्हि शृण्वतो नास्ति मे मृतम्.
Thank you. So it's not just that I want to know it and move on. I really want to understand. And in fact, in 10:18, as Veena ji just said, he in fact says, keep repeating. I don't get, this is Amritapana for me. I just want to go dwell more deeper into it, and I want to understand it. So the question often gets asked, is Arjuna this disinterested seeker of truth, and doesn't really care beyond what he's been used to, which he has accepted as dharma, and he's very austere, very practical? Or he's Indra Sambhuta, he's Aparoksha Jnani? I mean, where's the question of doubting his thirst for knowledge? So the question there to Madhuji is it even the right question, this knower versus doer? And if so, where should we place Arjuna, and how should we understand Arjuna's character? Madhuji, please.
So thanks, Suresh. That's an interesting point, because the concept of knower and doer. So the first point there is, in general philosophy, who is the knower and who is the doer? Is the brain the knower and the doer? Is the mind the knower and the doer? Or is it the jiva which is the knower and the doer? So that should be our first level of question, is we need to get clarification right at that point. Is antakarana, or a component of the mind, the doer and the knower? Or is jiva the doer and the knower? So that is one point which we need to clarify. There are different views of philosophy, different strands of Vedanta that has different views on this. So do your research and understand which one is actually the knower and the doer. Is it the antakarana or is it the jiva? Okay. So there is one school of thought which believes it is the jiva, the sentient being, which is the knower and which is the doer. And I personally would go for that view, which feels the sentient being is the knower and the sentient being is a doer. Because knower means what? He who has knowledge. Knowledge comes to a person. Knowledge always comes to a sentient being. Only a sentient being is aware of about himself or herself and the world outside of himself or herself. That is why we call that person as a knower. He is a conscious being. Okay, antakarana, mind, which is all brain, is a non-sentient thing. It is made up of chemicals. It is made up of matter. Matter does not have consciousness. It is the sentient being that has consciousness, and knowership is one of the symptoms of consciousness. So if you take that view, we have to agree there that jiva is the knower and the doer. So that is the first part of the algorithm. The next part of the algorithm is Arjuna a jiva or not? Now, we know from chapter 15, the Kshara Jivas include from Chaturmukha Brahma all the way to all the bacteria and all sentient beings. So the next point there is, yes, Arjuna, who is one of the Vedic deities, is a Jiva. He is a Kshara. So he is a Jiva. Finished. Next. Now, is that Jiva a dependent or an independent being? Okay, and we have done this before in our lessons. We said swatantram aswatantram cha dvividam tattvamishyate swatantro bhagavan Vishnu. Yeah, supreme being Vishnu alone is an independent being. All others are dependent beings. So then we understand that Arjuna is a dependent jiva. So that gives the answer to you that Arjuna is both the knower and the doer here, but he is a dependent knower and a dependent doer. Look at chapter 11, verse 33. He says, Nimitta matram bhava savyasachin. Okay. He says, you know what? I have sorted everything. I know what is going to happen. You are a mere instrument in this. Again, gives you an idea of the dependence. So he is just a dependent being, is just an instrument in all this. That concept is also captured in Talavakara Upanishad, and we have spoken about this several times, about the dialogue between Chaturmukha Brahma and Shiva, and how Shiva asks that question to Chaturmukha Brahma, Kene shitam patati, preshitam manaha, kena pranaha pratamaha preti yuktaha, Keneshitam vacham imam vadanti chakshuhu shrotram kavudevo yunakti. Says, how does the mind think? How do I speak? How do I see? How do I hear? How is this all happening? Shiva is asking. He says, you know what? Everything is done by the Supreme. You are not in you're not in absolute control of everything. Everything is done by the Supreme. So if you put all these equations in our discussion, what is clear here is Arjuna, the jiva, is the knower and the doer, but he is a dependent knower and a doer. And this is all happening at the impulsion of the Supreme, as we will see as we move along in the Bhagavad Gita, for example. So thanks, Suresh.
think Sudarshan had a question. Can I just request everyone to keep their videos on so we know if you want to ask a question, you can attract some attention, but leave your microphones off till you're speaking. Thanks.
Sudarshan, you have a question, please?
Yes, it's Chitra here.
Yes, Chitraji, please.
Session you said like you need to be in the right place but if you're in a difficult situation, how would you get a right? Well, we are not going to be like Arjuna to have Krishna next to us all the time, but how would we get the right person to answer our question at the difficult time?
So Chitra, I was going to come in. It's all preparation, preparation, and preparation, isn't it? So read the Gita and the scriptures and find the directions in the Gita. After all, the Kurukshetra war, we all know that dharma and adharma is not just external. It is also an internal war that we wage every day in our lives. So it is those preparations that you need to make. So maybe the key there is we have to find situations in our life where we have to apply Gita. Try that out, do that experiments out. Our ancients have done it. So many exalted souls down the generations have applied the teachings of the Gitas in their day-to-day life in a situation. Ask yourself the question, how would Krishna would have done? What advice Krishna would have given in that situation? Or what answers can I find in the Gita to address that situation? And believe me, it is there. So it's about doing swadhyaya. Let's do our readings, but at the same time, try and put it in our life for practical application. I think it's preparation, preparation, and preparation.
Yeah, thanks, Madhu. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu. And Chitraji, I'll just add what Krishna said in chapter 4, Pariprashnena Seva. I mean, the moment we feel we have got a right person somewhere around, let's make sure that we ask the questions that we want to, so we are prepared.
So probably I'll have to move next to Madhu's house soon. Thank you. Thanks.
I am not a sage or something. I am also exactly like you, doing studies and constantly learning. So it's all a combined effort from all of us.
So yeah, so thanks, Madhu. So we move on. I think so this was just to make sure that we get into dwelling into the lessons of chapter 15. As we've learned the last 5 shlokas, the essence of the quintessence, so to say, of the entire Vedic teaching. And these are the 9 gems that we articulated them as the tenets of Vedic philosophy. What we'll do in the next section is take a tenet by tenet and then try and relate it to what Arjuna has said and see what we can learn more. So that's the pattern we will follow from this slide onwards. And picking up on the first one, Hari Parataraha, this is what I've picked these 3 verses from of Arjuna's verses. And here's what Arjuna is saying. Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Param Pavitra. And it just doesn't stop there. Then he goes on to say, Tvam Adi Devaha, Purushaha, Puranaha, Tvamasya Vishwasya Param Nidhanam. And apart from that, he further goes on to say in 1143, Na Tvat Samaha Asti, Abhyudikaha Kutaha Anyaha, Lokatraya api apratima prabhava. So this is how Arjuna is describing Krishna. He's calling him the supreme abode, the supreme divine, the unborn, the place where everything ends, rests, the possessor of infinite forms. And then further on adds that where is the question of anybody being greater than you? There's nobody even far, anywhere close to you in the 3 worlds. So 2 questions there that come is fundamentally, would this description of Krishna from Arjuna, very firmly establish Arjuna's position in that that Krishna is supreme, the Hari Parataraha. But before we go there, we're seeing Arjuna using Para Brahma, Para here. We're talking of Hari Paratara. So this Para, Paratara, Paratama, and we have also learned about Kshara, Akshara, Kutastha Akshara when we looked at the 15, 16. So how does one reconcile? Madhu, if you could help.
that para, paratara and paratama concept. So in all of Vedic literature, as you would have seen over several months we have dealt with, it's all context. What is the context in which this particular word is being used? So please make a serious attempt to look at those contexts in which certain Sanskrit words are coming in various scriptures. So here, for example, I want to bring your attention to Gita chapter 7, verse 7, a very popular verse, as you all know. Mattaha parataram na anyad kinchidasti dhananjaya mayi sarvam idam protam sutre maniganaiva. So it's a very popular verse. Look there, Krishna himself is saying Mattaha parataram. He has said paratara there. Yeah. And then here in that first tenet, we have said Hari Parataraha. So what is this confusion there? So I have put this here, para plus tara, paratara, or para plus tama is paratama. Okay. So para is good. Paratara in colloquial sense, para means good. Paratara means better. Paratama means best. Yeah. Yeah. So, or you can say best, better, bestest if there is a word. Yeah. Paratama is the highest best you can have. So why that paratara is used there is quite interesting, because in this verse, for example, he has said parataram. He should have said mattaha paratamam. He has said only mattaha parataram. He should have said mattaha parataram there, but he has not. He has said parataram. So that makes the study of Gita more interesting as to why has he did parataraha. So let's remind ourselves of these verses from 16, 17, and 18, talking about Kshara Purushas, Kutastha Akshara Purushas, and Akshara, the Supreme Purushottama. There are three sentient categories. And Krishna is very categorically said, Ksharam Atito Aham Aksharadapicha Uttamaha. So he said he is beyond Jivas and he is way above Chetana Prakriti or Shri Tattva, which is what I have illustrated on the right here. So this guy here is Akshara, the Purushottama, and then we spoke about Kutasto Akshara as Lakshmi. Yeah. So Suresh, in that context, when Hari Parataraha is used, the discussion there is between Lakshmi and Vishnu. Okay. So when you take Lakshmi and Vishnu there, so in that context, when I say Paratara means I am superior to Lakshmi. Yeah. So this is when in comparison to Lakshmi, it becomes parataraha. But when it compares to everything in existence, it is paratamaha. Okay. So that is, it's comparative. So one is comparative superiority and the other one is supreme superiority. Compared to Lakshmi, he is superior. So paratara. Okay. That is one angle to it. The other angle is para also has various meanings. So one meaning of para comes from para and vara. They are all synonymous. Vara means sreshta. So para means something who is the highest. Okay. Para also means different. Para's another meaning is totally different. So this guy Brahman is not only far above Lakshmi, but he is totally different from Lakshmi in all aspects. He is different. So to bring home all those ideas, Krishna himself uses paratara in 7.7, and also in the tenets, Hari Parataraha is used. So hope that made sense.
Thanks, Madhu. Harish has a question on if there's a cost to being dependent, but Harish will pick that up when we come to Jivagana Harer Anucharaha. So I think we will pick it up along with that tenet. So if we move on to the next one then, which is if the Lord is supreme, then our experience, this world has to be real, Satyam Jagat. And then let's see if we can find some basis to this tenet from what Arjuna has said. And to illustrate that, I've just picked these three verses here, 10:15, 10:16, and 10:18, where Arjuna says, Krishna, only you understand yourself. There is nobody else who can understand you. You are the creator. You are the creator of this entire universe. You are the creator of this. You are the king of this kingdom, and then you have pervaded into all of this. How should one understand all this doing of yours? That's the question which Arjuna seems to be asking. And therefore the question, Madhu, is that Arjuna is talking to Krishna as the creator. He's addressing him as the creator. The entire Vibhuti Yoga, the entire 10th chapter perhaps dwells upon the manifestation of Krishna in various forms. Could this be taken as the position, understanding of Arjuna and related to this tenet of Satyam Jagat?
Yeah, interesting question, Suresh. Satyam Jagat is a very controversial doctrine, yeah, as you would have understood by now. So it's not for the faint-hearted. Satyam Jagat is not for the faint-hearted. But I just want to remind you, Vedanta Sutra. So the very first sutra was Atato Brahma Jignasa Om. And then when Vedavyasa said Atato Brahma Jignasa means then therefore inquiry into Brahman shall begin. And in the very next sutra, as we have spent time on this, is he defines, you know who that Brahman is? That Brahman is Janmadhyasya Yataha. So he defines, Vedavyasa defines that Brahman. The definition of Brahman is he who is the creator, etc. of all of existence. Janmadhyasya Yataha is the definition of Brahman, he who is the creator of the world. Okay, of world of sentient or non-sentient beings, that is you and me. Yeah, creation. What is a creation for us? We are uncreated, but our creation is linking us with a body, giving us ignorance, giving us knowledge, giving us samsara, or giving us moksha. And what is the creation for all the insentient things? It is their transformation, it is their transformation, maintenance, and their destruction, and their ability to volition, and so on. Yeah, so there are eightfold dispensations of creation, not just three, not just four, but eightfold dispensations, and we have seen it in Skanda Purana and various evidences that talk about this. Now Jayatirtha asks an important question. If Vedavyasa, who is our guru, Vedavyasa is the founder of Vedantic philosophy. We have done the 6 schools of Vedanta. One among the 6 schools is the philosophy that is propounded by Vedavyasa, what we call as Vedantic philosophy. Such a Badarayana or Krishna Dvaipayana has defined that this Brahman's definition is he is the creator of the universe. Okay, so the question there is, if there is a great artist, if we accept this Brahman as the great artist who creates things, are we then to think that his painting is false? Is the painting by Leonardo da Vinci, who paints Mona Lisa, he's a great artist, he paints Mona Lisa. Is that Mona Lisa an illusion? Does it not exist? If we define somebody as a great artist, then by definition it means his art must be real. Otherwise, there is no point in defining him as Janmadhyasya Yataha. So he captures this. He says, Janmadhyasya Yataha iti Bhagavata Sutrakarena Jagat Udayadi Nimitta Karanatvam Parasya Brahmano Lakshanam Abhihitam Nacha Jagat Satyatamantarena Tadvastavam Sambhavati. Unless it is a real creation, there is no point in describing him as Janmadhyasya Yataha. Okay? Superimposition is not a creation, Vivarta as it's called. So we have done this before. When you have a rope and if there is a superimposition and you see a snake, the superimposed snake is not created by the rope. We need to understand this very, very clearly when friends of certain schools bring this forward as a very clever syllogism. That syllogism is full of fallacies that people don't understand. Superimposition is not creation. The rope did not create the rope did not create the snake. It is in our brains that we have perceived this by linking two similar objects. Actually, the rope did not create the snake. Similarly, if we were to believe that Vivarta or the superimposition is the theory of creation, then Sutrakara should not have put Janmadhyasya Yataha at all there, because it is not a real creation. He should have put something else there. So that is one concept that I want to impress on, saying that, we have to accept this world as real. We can't just go around and say everything is an illusion. Then your mother and my mother, your wife and your husband, your children, everything is an illusion. So what is the purpose of this life? We have to have a rational, sound, scientific, deductive reasoning before we claim that world is an illusion. And that is the reason why I put this in red. World as an illusion or a mithya is an unproven hypothesis. It has never been shown that this world is unreal. If somebody can tell us this world is mithya, I will wholeheartedly accept that, but it has not been shown. All that has been shown is in a piece of paper. Yeah, but that doesn't give the answer. We need to experience world as an illusion. We have not, in the history of the universe, in the history of this world, with 7 billion people on the planet, nobody has experienced this world as an illusion. Now, another relevant question here, Suresh, really here is, if the world is an illusion and a mithya, Vedas are part of this world. Mahabharata is a part of this world. Krishna and Arjuna's discussion that has been documented in Bhagavad Gita is part of this world. Then does that mean that is an illusion or mithya as well? If something is illusion and mithya, then why bother and waste our time reading about this? So thinking about this, it felt quite relevant to just bring in those ideas. Is Mahabharata or illusion or never happened? Unfortunately, I have met a lot of individuals within our fold who somehow seem to think Mahabharata is a myth and it never happened, that this is all some fictitious story, and that, okay, there are some morals in that story. So let us just accept that morals and get on with our lives, but we don't have to necessarily accept that Mahabharata actually happened. So I just thought that it will be an interesting twist for today's discussion. And Sushrut, I think, has done a lot of research, a lot of bedtime reading that Sushrut has done to try and convince himself that this is what it is. So Sushrut, give us the overview of what the situation is.
Yeah, so I did do a fair amount of reading to find out, and there are both sides of the argument whether Mahabharata indeed is a myth or it's real, or whether part of it was real and then it has been embellished to make it what it really is. But overwhelmingly, there are evidences to say that it is indeed real. So the first thing is that Veda Vyasa in the Mahabharata itself calls it itihasa, and he does not call it a story. He calls it history. So, if he was writing a story, he would have labeled it so. So that is the first internal evidence. The second thing is that in the Mahabharata, it is a massive book, and in there are details. I think last week you put up a slide which showed the dynasties involved, right from Swayambhu Manu and so on and so forth, till we got to the Bharata part of it. And there are 50 generations listed in the Mahabharata. Now, if you were to write a story, you didn't really have to go into that amount of detail to make it palatable to people. I mean, you might go 2 or 3 generations, but 50 sounds a little bit too far fetched as a story. So, I think that gives us some evidence that it's probably real. And then on the archaeological side, there have been some marine archaeology evidence of the coast of Dwarka, which show a submerged city. I'm sure lots of you must have seen YouTube videos which have been going around on WhatsApp. And also there has been some archaeological evidence in a place called Sanoli, which is near Delhi, where they have found some chariots and things like that. So there is some archaeological evidence, but as we can see that the incidents have happened so far long ago that it is difficult to actually have definitive archaeological evidence maintained. Also, if we try and link Mahabharata to Ramayana, which is the other epic written by someone else, then there are dynasties and there are characters which coincide and intermingle with each other, like Parshurama, like Hanuman, and things. So, again, that gives us some credence to say that both were probably true. We know that from some evidence that there is a bridge between India and Sri Lanka, the Adams Bridge and things. So there are some evidences to say that if Ramayana is true, then probably Mahabharata is also true. From the view of Western history, Megasthenes was a Greek historian who visited the court of Chandragupta Maurya, has recorded that Chandragupta Maurya was the emperor of India, and he was the 138th king in the lineage from Lord Krishna. So they did maintain their ancestral records, and if that was recorded, then again that gives us some weight to say that Lord Krishna did exist, and if Lord Krishna existed, then Mahabharata did happen. And lastly, a while ago, Madhuji had circulated this article written by Dr. Vartak from Pune. And he has spent his lifetime on looking at various aspects. And in particular, he has done astronomical dating, because in the Mahabharata there are lots of events which are described with planetary positions. Now they don't give exact dates, but they do describe Rahu in this nakshatra and Shani here and that, things like that. Uh, and there were eclipses and there were comets described, and there are tithis described, and if you put it all together in and he used computer based analysis, and he proved that the alignment of the planets was very, very specific only to that date. And he has put the date of the war as 16th October 5561 BC as very, very specific. So I think overall, I feel the evidence is definitely towards real. So Satyam Jagat.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Madhu, there's one more, some of the evidence in the Tamil Chera kingdoms, they mentioned the old Tamil literature. They have mentioned that they sent for the Mahabharata war. They sent their army to support the Pandavas. Yeah. So there are mentioned in the Tamil literature about the Mahabharata, this happened. The Tamil literature in the Chera kingdom and all is in this side. So why would they mention something like imaginary?
Yeah.
And there is a lot of mention about Krishna visiting the southern India, the Madurai, which we call, is actually called Ten Madurai. Ten means in Tamil is south. So it's actually South Madura. It's called, that's where it comes to Madurai. Madurai is now, it's famous for Meenakshi temple and, Saivism, everything. But there's a lot of mention about Krishna visiting the south, and it's quite a lot of mention. If you go to the southern districts in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
So
That's very interesting, Sudarshan. Yeah, lots of points there. Now, another thing, Shushruth, I just wanted to mention was, if somebody had an issue with Badarayana when he wrote Mahabharata, to say that this is a myth. If somebody had an issue when he wrote, they would have raised an issue that you're writing a story. Why are you saying itihasa? Okay. There is no literature that is available from quote unquote prehistoric times or when Mahabharata was written that anybody refuting the non-existence of all these kings and so on. Certainly before the Christian era, I have not seen anybody talking about how all these are fictitious and so on. Okay. So this argument has come about in the last few tens or so, or probably a couple of hundreds of years. Okay. Now, the other way of refuting that is, there is no point. Were you there? You were not there to say it did not happen. If it had not happened, people would have objected when Badarayana wrote his work. And for so many thousand years in Indian history, nobody has questioned that this is a myth. Now we have some buffoons telling us this is a myth, and I don't think we should accept that. So all the arguments that you have given and listed today, plus the arguments that Sudarshan has posed, should make us feel proud of our history, our heritage, our ancestors, and so on. And none of this was a myth, is what I was going to say.
Thanks, Madhu. Thanks, Sushruta.
Can I
Thanks,
ask a
Sudarshan.
question, Sujit here?
Yes, please. Go ahead. Shri.
Sushruta, and anything on the warfare and the missile technology and those kind of things, like how do you explain Brahmastra and all those? Does that mean that like traditionally we were aware of these kind of advanced technology and warfare, which basically was again rediscovered, or and anything when you read it which could throw light on those things?
There is plenty on the internet, Sujit. Want to say that technologies did exist in the past and somehow they have been lost over a period of time. I mean, even in Ramayana, Rama flies back from Lanka, isn't it, on the Pushpak Vimana? So it was there. It just seems to be that maybe our intelligence and our capability was not good. So for the greater good, they were buried and lost. Otherwise, God knows what destruction we would have wreaked havoc nowadays.
Thanks, Sushruta. Thanks, Sujit. And I think it's also real that we are running to a time and we'll have to get through this quickly. This is an interesting topic, and I'm sure we'll err on experience. We will learn on the fact that we are here, we are talking to each other, we are perceiving it. And as Mohan puts on the chat, we have the Bhagavad Gita. We don't need to believe any one of that to be illusion. So we'll accept Satyam, Jagat, and move on. So if we have accepted Hari, Parataraha, and Satyam, Jagat, the question then comes is, if we are erring on experience, we experience differences. We've talked about it. Madhu's taken a lecture to explain why differences previously. But I just picked these couple of, these three shlokas. And Sheilaji, if I could please request you to help reciting 13, 1, 8, 1 and 8, 2, please.
Thank you, Sureshji. Prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnameva cha etadveditumichhami jnanam jneyam cha keshava kim tad brahma kimadhyatmam kim karma purushottama आदिभूतं च किं प्रोक्तम् आदिदैवं किमुच्यते आदियज्ञ कथं कोत्र देहेऽस्मिन् मधुसूदन प्रयाणकाले च कथं ज्ञेयोऽसि नियतात्मभिः. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheilaji. Thank you. So here's Arjuna asking Krishna, wanting to know, who's this Purusha? Who's Prakriti? What's Prakriti? What's Purusha? What is this Kshetra about? Kshetrajna. And he further goes on to ask, what's Adhibhuta? What's this material science? And this Adhyatma, as Mananji calls in some of this his lectures as Jivology. Why don't we have a subject of studying Jivas as Jivology, which is Adhyatma? Then he goes on the controlling mechanisms. Who's maintaining all this? The Adidaiva component of it, the Adiyajna component of it. So the question is, there are certain the differences, but if these were not different, we wouldn't have been expecting Arjuna to be actually probing Krishna on a battlefront to know more about this. And further to that, if it wasn't there, perhaps Krishna would have just said, "No, my dear friend, there's no difference." But Krishna doesn't do that. I mean, he actually goes on to provide explanation to the questions of Arjuna. So Tattvato Bhedaha as a tenet coming out of Arjuna's verses. Is it the right message, Madhu? Can we understand Tattvato Bheda from these verses of Arjuna? Madhu, you are on mute.
So definitely, as you said, if Satyam Jagat, if the world is real, then the differences that you see in this world probably has to be real, because variety is the spice of life. And who is going to refute that argument that variety is the spice of life? If you go hopefully in spring, when this lockdown is over, you go on a drive to the Cotswolds or come to our part of the world, Peak District, Derbyshire days, you will be seeing those rolling hills with sheep and cows in the pastures. Now, are these not different from each other, or each cow not different from another cow? The cowness may be there, but each cow is different. There may be cows of different age. They have different capacities to give milk, for example. So each cow that we see in our world is different. Just go back to your backyard when in autumn just gone, when the leaves were drying out. Just look at the tree leaves. Is any leaf of a tree same as the other? No, no leaf of a tree is different from no leaf of the tree is the same as the other. You just observe it. Even the leaves are different. Everything in the universe is different. Yeah. And I want to pose the opposite, Suresh, and I want to ask you, how would this world be if everything is the same? If everything is good, everything is beautiful, every day the food that you get on your plate is delicious. Every day you are driving, everybody is driving on Range Rovers. Everybody is going first class. Everybody is beautiful. How will your life be? Will you not get bored with all this? And you will say, this is all rather monotonous and mundane. I don't like this world where everything is the same and it's boring. So variety is the spice of life. If this world is real, the creation is real, and in the universe we see so many varieties of things. Every atom is different from another atom. Everything is different. So Acharya is telling us, see, this world is so different and so variegated. Bahuchitra jagat bahuda karanat parashaktihi anantaha gunaha paramaha. So when you see these differences everywhere in the world, don't be bewildered, but think about the God, the supreme God, who has brought this creation that is so variegate and so different. If this universe itself is so fantastic and beautiful, how great must be its creator? So that is what we should be asking the question once we have seen the differences, rather than have dry philosophical speculations to say, is the difference real or not? Yeah. So that is where I was trying to say there, and I'll stop there and see if others want to contribute.
No, thanks, Madhu. And it just reminds me that having read, I think, some time ago, but for mutation, there wouldn't have been music, or there wouldn't have been what we are enjoying as life today, or the variety around it. There is a question that's on the chat, which does the same means same as same in consciousness, but not otherwise. But maybe we'll pick it up in the next tenet, which leads us to, if we are saying, if we are perceiving differences, then the different objects, we need to establish a relationship amongst them. So we pick up the next tenet, which is Jiva Gana Harer Anucharaha, wherein the relationship being established between the Jivas and Paramatma is that of an Anuchara. The Jivas are the servants of the Lord. And I have picked these three verses of Arjuna again. And this is when Arjuna is seeing the magnanimous form of Lord Krishna himself, and is describing what he is seeing in chapter 11. He says, Paschami devam stavadeva dehe sarvam statha bhuta vishesha sangam brahmana misham kamalasanastham. He is actually seeing Brahma sitting on the lotus. He's seeing Shiva himself. He is seeing all the devas, and not just that, he is seeing Amichatvam, Dhritarashtrasya putra, all the sons of Dhritarashtra, all of these, and they are all heading into Krishna's mouth, as if Yatha Pradiptam Jwalanam Pratangaha. I mean, like moths are getting into, heading into fire to perish. So this is the Jivas, right from Brahma downwards. Everybody is getting into Krishna's mouth. So does the fact that all jivas are but servants perhaps stand so clearly illustrated by this picture was the message that at least I was getting. And we have two related questions to it, which Madhu, if you could deal quickly, is one is, this means dependence. and does dependence come at a cost of maybe being irresponsible? And the other thing is, with this difference, can we still be the same in consciousness with the Paramatma, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, hang on. My slides are, yes. So this concept of dependence, you have Jiva and you have Brahman or God. This concept of dependence, the philosophy comes from Rig Veda, and we have dwelt with this before. It's called Bimba Pratibimba Bhava, the object and the reflection. The relationship between Bimba, which is the object, Pratibimba, which is a reflection. This concept is discussed in Rig Veda, and there is a very beautiful 2 verses in Katha Upanishad as well that basically, it's a repetition of what is stated in Rig Veda. It says, Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya Indro Mayabihi Purarupayete Yuktahi Asya Harayaha Shatadasha. So it basically says the Supreme Brahman has got infinite forms inside every jivas, and he is the Bimba in the jivas, and he controls what the jivas do. So that relationship is of dependence. Exactly how a reflection will not move on its own, like I have shown in these 2 pictures here. Every time the object moves, the reflection moves. Yeah, the concept there is not that the reflection is an illusion, that it disappears. No, the concept there is the movements of the reflection is entirely dependent on the movement of the object. So that is the philosophy to capture in that Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. Yeah, look at Sistine Chapel. If any, I'm sure you've all been to Vatican. When you see this famous Sistine Chapel figure, it gets its inspiration from our Sanatana Dharma, where you have the son and the father. Father is the Purushottama, the son is the Jiva, and the Jiva is holding his fingers and touching the Paramatma, essentially capturing that philosophy of dependence, that the souls are eternally dependent on the Paramatma. Okay. Now, the second question, Suresh, about the consciousness. Are the consciousness of the jivas same? No. Consciousness of the jivas are not the same, in the sense, yes, as a concept of consciousness, it is the same. But there is another philosophical term called anusandana. I don't know if some of you might have heard about this. Anusandana in philosophy, compared it to psychology, is experientiality. Yeah. So in psychology, equivalent is experientiality. It is also called quela. Yeah, the psychologists will know the terms. That is, our individual experiences are different from others. So we may be sipping the same cup of tea, but the experience of the experience of teeness and sweetness that I have is different from your experience. It is the difference in experientiality that defines that the consciousness are also different. Although there is consciousness, the consciousness are different. Now, the issue about dependence, I didn't quite catch that question. Do you want to repeat that again?
So because we are so dependent on everything,
Yeah.
I mean, would we care? And the end of the day, it is him who is doing and getting everything done.
Yeah, sure. So that's a fatalistic question, and it's a very common kind of a argument around I don't want to do anything. But the answer to that is each jiva is endowed with its own inherent capacities and attributes. So when I talk about dependence, all that means is God provides an environment, a nourishing environment, where the jivas, based on their own inherent capacities and attributes, they play out their samsara to reach their destination. So God only provides you that facilities. In that sense, jivas are dependent on God for their own existence and the facilities that has been provided. But we are ultimately responsible for chartering our own destiny. So that is what is called jiva kartrutva, and we dwelt with it in the journey of souls in one of the sections, I think. So perhaps maybe we go back and look at that particular session. So that is about dependence, and consciousness is definitely unique for each one of us. If we all had the same consciousness, if somebody picks the pin on me, if I get the pain, and if your consciousness is the same, you should also feel the pain, but you do not. So that itself is a proof that the consciousnesses are different.
Thanks, Madhu. Just looking at the time as well, we perhaps will accelerate.
Yeah, sure.
more.
And I was going to say, we will ignore Sudarshan and Chitra and we'll go a little bit further if required, unless there is another program that Sudarshan is planning. Sudarshan, is that okay? We need to finish this session.
No problem, Madhu. Today there is no program. Not every
Okay.
week. Thank you. Please, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll
Still, yeah. So we will try and push a little faster. So one is the relationship between the jivas and the Purushottama, the Paramatma. But having just taking down the experience line, we also perceive differences amongst the jivas. So when we come to the next tenet, which is nichocha bhava gataha, so this element of hierarchy, and I've picked 4 shlokas of Arjuna to try and demonstrate it in 2 different aspects, one in Ihaloka and one in Paraloka for that matter, if I could state that way. So Harish ji, could I request you to please help with the recitations of 11.4 and 14.21, please? Harish, if you are on the call, please.
Can you not hear me?
Yeah, we can now. Thank you.
Manyase yadi tachakyam maya drashtumiti prabho yogeshvara tato me tvam darshayatmanam avyayam kairlingaistrin gunanetan atito bhavati prabho kimacharah katam chaitan trin gunanati vartate.
Thanks, Harish. Yeah, I mean, Arjuna is itchuk. He's aspiring to see the Vishwarupa Darshana, and but he's telling Krishna, only if you think I am able to. There is no way I can compare myself to you. In the sense, if you think I have the ability, if I have the samarthya to withstand that vision of yours, show that vision unto me. But cleverly, Badarayana uses Yogeshwara there, and he also is trying to perhaps say that, you can also give that ability to me if I don't have it. Why don't you just provide that and just show me your Vishwarupa Darshana? And the other aspect in 14.21 is perhaps there are people who get beyond this the 3 gunas, and we can actually see and perceive them. How can we detect that difference? So that is what is being articulated here, that there is differential ability amongst jivas in these 2 sets of shlokas. And Chitraji, if I could request you to help with 11.27 and 28, please.
Yes, Sureshji. Hare Krishna. Vaktrani te tvaramana vishanti damshragaralani bhayanakani keshit vilagna dashanantareshu sandrishyante shurnitairuttamangai yada nadinam bahavombuvegaha समुद्रमेवाभिमुखा द्रवन्ति तदा तवामि नरलोका वीरा विशन्ति वक्त्राण्यभिविज्वलन्ति. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitraji. And forget here, now people are getting into Krishna's mouth, and there are some whose heads are being smashed between his teeth, and there are others who are imperceptibly mingling into Krishna's mouth, like a river just gets into its delta and merges into the ocean. So there is differentiation even there, and there is differentiation even here. So this concept of nichocha bhava, either here is implicit, and it's something inherent. That is the message which seems to be illustrated by these 4 sets of shlokas. Madhu, if you could please.
Yeah, so I was going to pick on that because you so beautifully illustrated in the previous slide, Suresh, that in all the chapters we are seeing a relationship of somebody is far below a kshara, a jiva, looking up to this Purushottama who is so far above. Nicha and Ucha. Yeah. So there itself the Nicha and Ucha bhava has come in between the jiva and the supreme. And that Nicha Ucha Bhava is not only between that, it possibly is there in the jivas as a community as well. Now, as you said, as to how various jivas are getting in, there seems to be a difference. Everybody could have flown as a river, but he has said somebody is smashed, somebody is happening, this is happening to them. So there are differences there itself as different things are happening. How do we kind of read into this? So one thing I just wanted to introduce this rather it's more provocative is, what is philosophy? Yeah, the basic question, why are we interested in this? What is philosophy? Tattva nirnaya, what does that mean? It means determination of things as they are in themselves. We want to know the truth, and that is the route to know the truth is through philosophy. So for such a truth, what is the foundation on which human beings base their philosophy? They base their philosophy on experience. Experience is the foundation of philosophy. Yeah. Now, what do we experience? The inequality that we see around us is a fact of life. Yeah. Yeah. How does one account for it? I've just put a series of questions. So the inequality, does it exist or not, is a question. You can take a utopian view on this, or you can be a hard taskmaster and take the bull by its horn and then deal with it. This is the reality. I need to explain why there is inequality in the world. If somebody says, yes, we are all equal as jivas, but with endowment and capacities, we are different. Yeah. Some may say that, some may say, no, we are all equal as jivas and we all have an equal capacity to achieve liberation, for example. I'm being controversial here for the purpose of being controversial. Okay. How do you address that question? How do you account for the differences that you see? Because experience is the foundation on which philosophy is based. You cannot brush inequality that you see as non-existent. That is not an answer. If you say inequality that you see is non-existent, it is an illusion, it is a myth, such as from our Buddhist friends who have this kind of view. That cannot be an answer to the inequality that you see around you. So if it is existent, then the next question is, if existent, is it due to inequalities of karma of individual souls? The answer seems to be okay, that it seems to be because of the karmas that the souls have done, that somebody is born into a rich family, somebody is born into a poor family, somebody is healthy, somebody is not, somebody's got various diseases. Okay. If so, if this is due to inequality of karma, then the next foundational question is, what is the origin of inequalities of karma? Why is different people having different levels of karma that dictates what happens in their next life? Now here I want to bring a key argument here. As we discussed before, knowership and doership, it belongs only to a sentient thing, not to a jada. So the question there is, only sentient beings are capable of self-initiated action. We all know that. So many times we've heard that. And actions dictate the karma. Yes, of what karmic imprints that we get. So if sentient beings are capable of self-initiated action, then the basic question is, if so, what is the reason for differences in self-initiated action? Yeah. So when you break down in a very logical, scientific way, invariably you will land up with Swarupa Yogyata of jivas. Each jiva, which is uncreated, comes with its own package of attributes and intrinsic qualities that dictates what it does. Okay, so this is one philosophy, and the reason why this seems more plausible is, if you don't accept this, you will never be able to explain inequalities of the world, and more importantly, like how Saint Thomas Aquinas in his book, the great Catholic philosopher, asks the same question, and if that was not the case, cruelty and partiality comes to God. If this fellow is so benevolent and he is so goodness himself and he creates souls, why has he not created all souls as good? Or why does he not convert some bad souls to good souls? When all those deep philosophical questions come up. So the view that souls are uncreated but they have an eternal attributes to them is one solution to this problem. So in essence, the karmas are the consequences of jiva's attributes, and as I say here, there are various jivas up to infinity, and each jiva seems to have its own specific attributes that dictates the action it does, that results in a karma, and with karma comes all our mundane things that we suffer or enjoy in this life. Look at an example of a classroom. You have 100 students here. They're all writing their exams. Yeah, they're all jivas writing the exams. Okay. Some get 100%, some get 35%. Why? They've all gone through education, but they all fare differently. Here is a second example, classic example of Duryodhana and Bhima. What happens to them? Duryodhana is Kali himself. He eventually goes to Andhatamas, whereas Bhima is Vayu and eventually he will go to Moksha. Although they are jivas themselves, no matter what happens, their destination, because of his own intrinsic nature, he takes the route to Andhatamas, whereas the other one goes to Moksha. So when you look at all these and you want to ask fundamental questions, that Nichocha Bhavam Gataha, unfortunately, however bitter it is, seems to be the sad fact of life. And it would do us well that we accept that, find our own, what our self attributes are, go for our self realization, and make our journey towards liberation. Thank you,
Yeah,
Thanks,
Suresh.
Madhu. Yeah.
Madhu, in this context, I also want to tell you one thing. Well, even we see so much of differences in the mental health characters of monozygotic twins. Twins who are identical twins, you're supposed to be have shared the same genes and everything. They may have physical characters very much similar, but we have they have the mental characters very much different. Some of them are common, so sometimes we see them, both of them, developing mental illness, similar mental illness and everything. But majority of them, they're very different in the character approach. One of them may be a good person, other may be bad person, like our Bollywood cinemas. But also I've seen them in real life as well, because I'm a psychiatrist myself, and we see like patients having very, very, even monozygotic twins. I'm saying, like, monozygotic means identical twins. They have very different characters. So like, this is in a situation where the genes are supposed to be the same, but they have a very, very different characters.
That's very interesting, Sudarshan. In our Vedic philosophy, there is always this called Swabhava and Prabhava. Prabhava is the environmental factors, and our Vedic philosophers will pool environmental factors not only to the environment around you, but also your genetic pool, which is also material. They all come under the group of Prabhava, and Swabhava is the intrinsic nature of the souls that essentially dictates what happens to them. So it seems to make sense, but that's interesting observation about twins. Thanks.
Thanks, Madhu. So we will move on. We'll plug along. So the next aspect perhaps is, for all of this, Arjuna had it easy. I mean, in the sense that he had Krishna with him, and he could actually ask him, and Krishna gave him the answers. He had to do a monstrous task of fighting the war. That's keeping that apart, but just acquiring the knowledge. He had Krishna as his charioteer, and he could ask him questions. Says, "How do I understand you? You know what? I've listened to whole of chapter 10. It's all clear to me. But if you think, just show me. I would like to see your Vishwarupa Darshana." So he had the benefit of direct interaction with Krishna. And what about pramana for us, who are, and how do we accept what is valid, what is not valid? And the other thing I just want to bring in here very quickly is that we did see in chapter 15:15, that Krishna throughout the Gita says, "I am this, I did this, it's because of me." There are thousands of things which he says, I am responsible. But the one thing that he does not own is the authorship of the Vedas. So does this mean the apaurushayatva of the Vedas, and therefore the agama? So how does it all come true for people like us who are trying to understand?
Yeah, so absolutely, Suresh. So now just remember to put things in context. We have spoken so high levels of this, a lot of deep philosophies and stuff that has been discussed in the initial bits of all the other tenets and tattvas. Now here, when we say Hakshari Tritayam Pramanam, it is remind us how can we gain knowledge as sentient beings or human beings. This is a sadhana sharira that we have. This is our opportunity to gain knowledge and do sadhanas. And how do we do that? So we do that by using three instruments of knowledge. What are the three instruments of knowledge? pratyaksha, or the ones that comes through perception through our sense organs, or anumana, which is, we know this famous example of a smoke in a mountain, and we infer that there is fire because there is smoke in the mountain, because you have seen fire and smoke in the kitchen. So you relate. So that is inferential knowledge. That is the second. And inferential knowledge is, by the way, is very common in scientific literature. Yeah, scientific literature, inferential knowledge is very common. And some of us are very much research intensive in our professional work, but people lose the sight that scientific knowledge is inferential knowledge, is totally dependent on perception, and the perception or the data that you gain from perception is only as good as the instrument that you use. Yeah, so the scientific knowledge has one of those major limitations of inferential knowledge based on perception. But then you have the third mechanism called agamas, or these are revelations, revelatory knowledge, and that is where the Paurushaya Vedas come in. So the science there is, for all material things we use pratyaksha and anumana, but for non-material things, about knowing about jiva, knowing about God, knowing about karma, knowing about swarga, knowing about naraka, and all those karma concepts, we have to understand from agamas, because we can't see them with our eyes or hear them through our ears. So we have to go for revelatory texts. So the concept of hekshadi tritam is introduced here because all the previous tenets that we have discussed has actually extracted its core knowledge from these three instruments. Suresh.
Thanks, Madhu. There was another question on the chat, if other schools of philosophy also accept same definition for pramana or not. So maybe a quick yes or no, and then we can move on in the interest of time.
Yes, it's called yatartam pramanam. Okay, yatartam pramanam is knowing things as they are is pramanam. Pramana means, yes, all schools accept this, but certain other schools have dissected this at great level. Yeah, of kevala pramana, anupramana, and also to go into great details to look at which is important. Upajivya pramana, upajivaka pramana. What is the nature of anumana? What is the position, ontological position of anumana, and so on. These are very interesting things, but they can be quite dry to discuss. Both in Eastern and Western philosophies, they have dissected this out in great depths. And within Vedanta, certain schools of Vedanta have actually looked at this problem very, very carefully, well advanced from all Western philosophers. Western philosophers have done this only after the 15th or the 16th century, but our philosophers have done this 5,000, 6,000 years ago. So that's where the differences and our concepts have evolved, but generally they remain the same. Thanks.
Thanks, Madhu. So we got two more tenets to cover, and we'll accelerate even faster. The next one is about, that the Vedas talk only about Hari. So I've just picked two shlokas here. One in 10:12, when Arjuna is actually calling Krishna as Purusha, Shashwata, Divya, Adideva, Aja, Vibhu. These are the adjectives that Arjuna uses. And just to make sure that it's not, just he's exaggerating, that he's very much within his senses when he is saying this, he further goes on in the very next shloka to say that, what, it's not just me who is saying it. The Devarshi Narada has said it. Asita, Devala Rishis. These are Rishis that Arjuna had met, and he had actually heard them talk about all of this. And Krishna himself is saying that he is the one who is talked about in the Vedas, as we saw in chapter 15. So we've talked enough of this. Interest of time, Madhu, if you could quickly reflect on this, and then we'll move on to the next one.
So as I said before, the reason why Akila Amnayaka Vedyo Harihi has come is, as I discussed in the previous slide, material things can be known only through pratyaksha and sense organs, and some inference based on this, but non-material things cannot be seen with our sense organs, and you have to go to revelatory scriptures. So sutra same arupava devahi tat pradhanatvat, because this God is beyond matter, you cannot see him with pratyaksha. Yeah, Anumana, again, Katha Upanishad says, Naisha Tarkena Matirapaneya. With logic, you can't say, because with logic, you can say anything. With logic, you can say God exists. With logic, you can say God also does not exist. So the only way to understand this is Agama or Vedas. So here the word Akhila Amnayaika Vedyo Harihi has been used. What does Amnaya actually means? We know the Shastra Yonitvat Sutra from Vedantasutra, and we've dwelt with a lot. In Mahabharata Purana, there are various names given to Agamas, that is the Vedas. Apaurushya Vedas have got various synonyms. So what are the ones? Vedaste Nitya Vinnatvat, Shrutayashta Akilaihi Shrutehe, Amnayo Ananya Padadi Isha Buddhis Tata Sada. Okay, so what that is a definition of Amnaya. What Amnaya means, the sequence in which the Varnas are there, and that Varnas then becomes manifested sounds and it becomes Vedas. The eternal sequence of the eternal Vedas, they are never changed in the Brahman's mind. They are always of the same sequence. And as you know from the famous Rig Veda verse, Data Yata Purvam Akalpayat. So in every creation, the same sequence keeps coming. So what the set of Vedas that we have in this creation is the same sequence in the previous creation. And that is why it is called Amnaya. So I just wanted to pick on the Amnaya word because that's interesting. It gives you an idea that Apaurushya Veda is changeless. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Madhu. So we move to the next tenet, which is Muktir Nairjasuka Anubhutihi. I mean, when it is all of this that we are saying, I mean, is fundamentally in the end to enable us to experience our inherent bliss. So this entire dialogue between Gudakesha and Rishikesha is where we started with while talking about a little while ago. So if we just look at the various questions that, or the aspects that Arjuna brings into foray in this discussion, starts with 254 when Arjuna is talking, when Krishna is talking about sadhana, when he's talking about jnana. I mean, it starts with the question of sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava, and then ends with his last question in the beginning of the 18th chapter, and asks a very, very difficult question, which basically talks about the difference between tyaga and sannyasa. So that's what comes in 18.1. But if you look at the things in between, the various aspects that Arjuna dwells with, if you count them, there are 16 of them. And I would say that it's no coincidence that the Nara of Narayana is bringing up 16 aspects to discuss with the 18th, the Purushottama. So of those, I have just picked 3 to just make one point here. And I would request Sujit to help with the recitation of the 3 shlokas picked. Sujit, please.
Yeah. अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय बलादिव नियोजितः योऽयं योगस्त्वया प्रोक्तः साम्येन मधुसूदन एतस्याहं न पश्यामि चञ्चलित्वा स्थितिं स्थिरम् कच्चिन्नो भयप्रविष्ट छिन्नभ्रमिव नश्यति अप्रतिष्ठो महाबाहो विमूढो ब्रह्मणः पतिः.
Thanks, Sujit. Thank you. So the question is, what is this driving force? I don't want to do sinful acts, and I end up doing it. So what's driving these actions that I don't need to? And it's not an easy decision to pick the right and the wrong. In fact, Krishna himself says in chapter 4, Kim karma kimakarmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha. Difference between the karma, akarma, vikarma, even the knowledgeable ones don't find it very easy to decipher. Then he further, one of the most critical elements that we see is the control of the mind. And it is not possible. In fact, there's a statement which Arjuna says it's impossible to control the mind, to which Krishna responds, of course. And it culminates to say that, we really want to do it, but we've started and there's no way we are going to get all of this done. Where does it leave us? Do we keep loitering like a broken cloud, neither here nor there? So in this entire journey, what's the message to the seekers who would like to strive, Madhu?
So a couple of things, Suresh. When you said 16, I just wanted to remind folks also. You spoke about the 16 for the Nara and how the 16th entity is the Jiva, as we know from Shatprashna Upanishad question. Also in Bhagavad Gita, as you know, Krishna spoke 574 verses to Arjuna, and he taught in 574. You asked the question, why 574? Why should Krishna use some odd number, 574? He could have rounded it all up to 580 or something. But the answer there is 5 plus 7 plus 4 is also 16. Yeah, so it all fits in. That 16 is a message given to the 16th entity Krishna. So Vyasa is an ordinary guy. He is a genius. He puts everything to give subtle philosophy there. That was one point. So now in this, as you said, we all seem to be bewildered in this samsara and going around like headless chickens. Now this spirit, we don't have time to go through all the 3 verses, but I just want to take one verse and I've underlined Katha Upanishad. Will tell you something there. Paranchikani Vitrinat Swayambhuhu Tasmat Parang Pashyati Na Antaratman Kashchid Dhiraha Pratyag Atman Aikshatat Avrita Chakshun Amrutatvam. Beautiful Sanskrit language Nachiketa is using, complicated words full of philosophy. But basically what he's saying is God has created this body so that our indriyas are always looking outside, because he's testing you. Yeah, he has created all these indriyas for you so that you can constantly look outside. Not many fellows actually look inside. Only dhiraha, the ones who are knowledgeable, will actually start looking inside and look at that antaratman who is there. So when they use that third eye, avrutta chakshuhu amrutatvam ichan, then they reach that abode of moksha. Look at the Krishna himself has said, Shraddhavan labate jnanam. So Suresh, the first thing that we all need is the Shraddha or the faith. Faith in what? Faith that there is a supreme being who actually exists. And the faith that Vedas are the source of knowledge for us to know about that supreme being. So Krishna is advising us, start off your philosophical journey with that faith, and then experiment with that faith by reading the scriptures. And when you start experimenting, then you'll realize that what is said in the scriptures is the truth. And the truth is amrutatvam, so that you go towards moksha or liberation. Now, how is that liberation going to be? What is that bliss? There is all sorts of, hypotheses around it. What on earth is bliss actually about? And I've just put a pictorially a person who's tasting coffee. Can anybody here in the audience can actually write a paragraph as to what is the taste of coffee? You cannot even do a PhD thesis. Forget about writing a paragraph of what the taste of a coffee is. A taste of a coffee is you experience the taste of the coffee. That is the taste of the coffee. Similarly, experiencing your self-realization and God realization and your moksha, that blissful state is an experience that you experience, which is unique to yourself. And if you want to experience that, our scriptures give us a journey that you become a Shraddhavan, then you become a Dhiraha, then you become an Aparoksha Jnani, then you attain the liberation. So it is certainly available for our disposal, particularly if we are Sattvika Jivas, like I think all of us here who convene here, I keep saying this, we are all Sattvikas because we are after the right knowledge. Eventually we will all become Dhiraha because we got Shraddha. We all got Shraddha, otherwise we won't be here. We will become Dhiraha eventually and then find our liberation. So remember the taste of a coffee. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu. And as we try to describe the taste of coffee, perhaps inevitably as we learn more, bhakti becomes a side effect, I suppose. So such bhakti does come in once we get the respect and knowledge of which emerges from jnana, which is so brilliantly illustrated here in 1144. If you could just recite that quickly. Yeah.
तस्मात् प्रणम्य प्रणिधाय कायं प्रसादये त्वामहमीशमीड्यं पितेव पुत्रस्य सखेव सख्युः प्रियः प्रियायार्हसि देव सोढुम्.
So Arjuna is just bewildered, astonished by the Vishwarupa Darshana, and he really doesn't know. I mean, he says, where should I even salute you? I mean, I'll salute you from front, from behind, from anywhere. I have made mistakes, and I prostrate before, implore you for your grace. Fundamentally, like a father forgives his son, as a friend forgives his friend, as a Lover pardons the beloved. Please forgive my offenses. So end of the day, it is devotion that's emergent from knowledge and love, and most certainly not out of fear. Seems to be the central message that's coming out of the way Arjuna expresses bhakti. Madhu, please. Madhu, you are on mute again.
So when you said Amala Bhaktishta, please note the word, it says Amala, not just Bhaktishta Tatsadhanam. Amala Bhaktishta Tatsadhanam. Amala means pure, yeah, pure bhakti. So that is what is a resounding message again and again. And as you said, that bhakti mixed with knowledge, dry bhakti. You cannot have love of somebody without knowing about that somebody. It is just not possible. You need to have knowledge, and knowledge should mature into a spontaneous love. So that is what is bhakti is. Now see in our scriptures how much importance is given to bhakti. Yeah, there is a separate pada in Vedantasutra called Bhakti Pada. Third adhyaya, second pada is Bhakti Pada. Veda Vyasa talks about the greatness of the Supreme so that it will induce bhakti, the devotion towards him. Look at chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. It's called Bhakti Yoga. Why? Because it talks about the greatness of the Supreme so that you are awestruck in wonder and you start admiring that person and start loving that person. And if you go through all the Upanishads, there are hundreds and hundreds of upasanas of how to think about the Supreme Being in all the worldly things that we see, how to relate that with the Supreme and worship him. So all those upasanas of Upanishads, what are these three things? So these are the Prasthana Trayas. The reason why I put that is these are the Prasthana Trayas: Sutra Prasthana, Gita Prasthana, Upanishad Prasthana. These are our Prasthana Trayas, and they focus a lot on bhakti. Unfortunately, some philosophies have removed bhakti away from the equation and they have given it a namke vaste position in Vedantic philosophy, assuming knowledge alone can be liberating. Yeah, knowledge alone cannot liberate because knowledge is a jada. It is not a sentient thing. It is a jada and it is not capable of doing anything. Just as how if you want to switch on the light so that you remove darkness, that is fine from a light and a darkness perspective. If light is knowledge, once the light is switched on, darkness goes. That is, ignorance goes. But let us not forget, somebody has to switch that plug on. Somebody has to switch it on. Unless somebody switches this on, the light never comes on. That switching by a person is the divine grace. And that divine grace can happen only if you have bhakti. So that is why our Prasthana Trayas is given so much importance through Bhakti Pada, Bhakti Yoga, and various upasanas of Upanishads. And that, as you said, is a summum bonum of all the summary of all the Vedantic philosophy. If all that we study do not lead us to bhakti, then it is a complete waste of time. Yeah. And if you have just bhakti with no knowledge, it is like putting money in an account which will never give you any interest. So you need to put your account in the right account so that you get your interest. So knowledge and bhakti go together is the essence of all the tenets that Arjuna himself has illustrated in various chapters, and that was summarized in chapter 15, Suresh.
Thanks, Madhu. Thank you. What a journey it's been, friends. This chapter 15, looking at it from various different aspects, a lesson in motivation, perhaps. And this motivation, quite different from what we are generally used to. I mean, in the sense, there's no instigation, there is no hurting of pride, there is no fear mongering, there is no character assassination. I mean, there could have been many different ways of trying to motivate Arjuna to fight the war, but we see none of that. Just plain speaking, bare facts, root cause of Arjuna's dilemma, and then getting it out. And as Sanjay very nicely summarizes it in the last shloka, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Sri Vijayo Bhutir Dhruvani Terma Termama. Where there is Krishna, where there is Arjuna, there is but victory, there is but progress both from within and outside. So with that, the idea was that if the tenets that we learned from the last 5 shlokas of chapter 15, where the essence of the quintessence was there a different take? When can we look at it from different aspects and try and see if Arjuna could be used as a teacher to get to the same 9 tenets? And that was the attempt. So thank you all. And I will just finish by, we can just finish in the end with the prayer. Maybe I'll hand over to Jamna ji for the next event, please.
Thank you, Suresh ji. So this is Meera Bhajan, and I think we're going to focus on the bhakti aspect here. Gunguru band tan aaye meera, Gunguru band tan aaye, Gunguru band tan aaye meera, Gunguru band tan aaye. नाचत गावत वृंदावन में, नाचत गावत वृंदावन में, नाचत गावत वृंदावन में, गोविंद गोविंद गाए मीरा, गोविंद गोविंद गाए मीरा, घुंघरू बांध तन आए मीरा, घुंघरू बांध तन आए। जग की कुल मर्यादा भूले, प्रेम में हो मत वाली झूले, जग की कुल मर्यादा भूले, प्रेम में हो मत वाली झूले, रो रो गाए श्याम बुलाए, रोवत गावत जगत नचाए, घुंघरू बांध तन आए मीरा, घुंघरू बांध तन आए. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Jamna ji. And just to end this teacher taught this entire chapter 15, just with a prayer from Vayustuti. मातर में मातरिश्वन पितलतुलगुरो भ्रातृष्टाप्त बंधो स्वामिन् सर्वांतरात्मन् नजर जरै तज्जन्म मृत्याभयानां, गोविंदे देहि भक्तिं भवति च भगवन् नूर्जितां निर्निमित्तां निर्व्याज्यां निश्चलां सद्गुणगण बृहतीं शाश्वतीं आशुदेव. Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shushrat, handing it over back to you to close the session, please.
Thank you, Suresh ji and Madhu ji and all the participants. It's been a fantastic journey, a completely different angle to look at all the 9 tenets, and really enjoyed the session personally. You have been Guda Kesha, you have spent a lot of time trying to get all these slides together, and Madhusudan ji is always Madhusudan ji, he is our Rishi Kesha. So it's been a nice discussion between our own Guda Kesha and our own Rishi Kesha. So it's really been nice, and very nice Bhakti Bhajan to finish it off as well. So thank you to everyone, and I think Madhusudan ji has got a plan for the coming week, so I'll hand it back to Madhusudan.
Okay, Suresh, I'm not going to, Suresh and Shishud, thank you very much. Again, I echo what you've said so far. Wonderful event, wonderful 2 weeks, very, very interactive program. This is how it should be. It should not be just one person just shouting and telling something. It has to be 2-way, 3-way kind of interaction. So that's the spirit in which we have to move forwards. So what I was suggesting, and then we have discussed this for a while as to what needs to happen next. Now, as I said before, few months ago, we did something about Omkara. I think we did some justice. And then we have spent a lot of time, I think 3 or 4 months talking about Purushottama. But what we missed in between was the discussion about Gayatri, because they're all linked with each other. Om, then Pranava, Vyahriti, Gayatri, Purushottama, Vedas, and all the sounds that celebrates the Supreme. They're all linked with each other. So I felt that if we do justice to Vyahriti and Gayatri and finish that sequence, and then, as how Suresh and others mentioned, that discussion of Om and Gayatri is very much the essence of Mandukya Upanishad, which, as you know, is part of Atharva Veda. So Atharva Veda has got three big Upanishads that we can think about, very important Upanishads. One of this is Mandukya Upanishad. You have other, of course, Atharvana Upanishads or Mundaka Upanishad is also very good. So we'll focus on Mandukya Upanishad because that talks about Om and it talks about consciousness. What does that Om mean? What does that consciousness mean? And so on. So that'll be a natural progression from Vyahriti and Gayatri. And then we go into Mandukya Upanishad. This will be the first Upanishad that we are seeing it in its entirety. So we have always had different verses here and there talking about this. It's not a long Upanishad, but it's profound Upanishad in its own right. So let's do the Mandukya Upanishad over a couple of months. And then Dr. Sridharan, who is a neuropsychiatrist, he is going to give us a talk on neurochemistry and consciousness from a scientific medical perspective on the 11th of April. So that will be a nice completion to that whole sequence. Om and consciousness in the Vedas, and then how does neurochemistry contribute to our understanding of consciousness. There are a lot of psychiatrists and other professionals within this group. So I think that will actually elicit a lot of discussion here, I'm hoping. So that is leading us up to April. Okay, and then we will see, God willing, where he takes us. And we also hope and pray that this lockdown comes to an end, and that we've all had our vaccination and life will come back to some normality, so that we can actually meet in three-dimensional space. Space-time correlation has gone out in this forum, so we really need to meet up at some point. So that's what the plan is. Sudarshan, is that all right, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. I think this model is very good. Where sort of, there's a lot of discussion and people's involvement and everything. So it's a very good idea from you, and we'll go along with whatever you say. I think, well, as you said, like if the lockdown ends, we can all meet in person. But I have a feeling that even if the lockdown ends, people will want their Zoom sessions every week because people cannot meet every week. So I think they will still want you to do the Zoom session forever. So do not don't think that people will let you go. So it will be there every week.
Okay, sir, but I'm still a grihastha, so but we'll see.
Not at all. I think we will all help you. We'll all support you.
Is he going to do the shopping for you, Madhu, every week? He doesn't even.
Yeah, okay, done, Sudarshan. Excellent. I think this Sahiti group has matured so much over the last 12 months, and our Hindu Knowledge Academy as a group has also matured so much. So we are getting more and more members into the fold. So I would still urge, spread the word, spread the message. So the more we get into our fold, the better we grow. So I think the organization will go from strength to strength. So keep your focus on it, Sudarshan. Thank you very much. Firstly,
yeah, I think the lockdown will give us more opportunity to, we can all have a retreat for a weekend somewhere physically, and also we can have more variety and everything. So in that way, the lockdown ending will help. But we'll continue our sort of quest for more and more knowledge, and we'll be there. And I think we need to thank Sushrut and Suresh Kankanwadi and team for doing a wonderful job today. So shall we sort of give them a big hand as well, and to Madhu as well? Thank you. Then, yeah, we'll all say thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhuji. Thank you,
thank you all.
Thank you, Sudarshan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sushrut as well.
Thank you very much.